we first started, no one could believe that you could make your living doing something you love.
I think even today there is a need for living with and using objects that are made by hand.
Now artists and craftsmen are real business people. You know, you're not doing it so you can make money to go to Mexico or to Bali and have like a massage. You're really doing it because it's your life.
I like to say we're just a bunch of capitalist hippies, you know, actually making a living, playing for a living.
In the hills of western Maryland, on land crossed by Native Americans and Civil War soldiers, sits the historic town of Burkittsville. Established in 1824, 200 townspeople now call Burkittsville home. Among them is potter Bill Van Gilder.
I grew up in central Maryland, and I think Maryland actually has its fair share, abundance of working craftspeople in all media, from glass to wood to clay to metal. It is an exceptionally beautiful small state, and it's easily accessible from all points on the East Coast. My day is pretty much all about pots, either the making of them, the finishing of them, or the selling of them. And my day starts quite early. Usually I'm up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and I'm out here by 8. I keep a very stringent regiment. It takes discipline to be an artist these days in America. I was taught as a teenager to make pots by a master potter, the late Byron Temple, and he had trained with a potter in England called Bernard Leach, who was the grandfather of American studio pottery in the West today. Byron taught me the best ways to make pots as a youth, and I grew up using those techniques, which allows me currently to make a living. This is a series of pictures I'm making. I have about 36 of them to make, and I'll make those this morning and finish them off tomorrow. One of the first things we do is prep the clay, and it's a mixture of 5 different materials which I blend here in the studio myself. And then each morning I'll come out and put my list together for making and get down to it.
Bill is part of the contemporary American arts and crafts movement. Along with other artisans of his generation, he continues an American tradition of creating handcrafted artwork that began more than 100 years ago. Early artisans who settled along the eastern seaboard came by way of Plymouth Rock, Ellis Island, and a dozen other ports of call. They came from Europe, Asia, and England, Austria, India, and Thailand. Most brought few possessions, but in their hearts, they carried the rich cultures and traditions of their homelands. By the turn of the 19th century, the world had given America more than its share of talented artists. The demands of life on the American frontier ensured that the earliest American art forms were born of necessity. Homes were constructed from field stone and timber. Coverlets were woven to keep settlers warm. Metal was forged into tools. Wood was carved into tables, bowls, and spoons. But the art of handcrafting everyday objects was nearly lost in the latter half of the 19th century, as the mills and factories of the Industrial Revolution drew men and women off their farms, out of their homes, and into the brick buildings of the city. But over the clang and clatter of the factories, strong voices rose up demanding an artistic response to the industrial age. The American craft movement would be heavily influenced by similar events taking place across the Atlantic. Under the leadership of William Morris and the teachings of John Ruskin, the British were also taking steps to counter the side effects of their industrialization.
John Ruskin and William Morris are probably the figures who are most influential to the arts and crafts movement, both in England and in here. Almost every American home had copies, if not complete works of Ruskin and Morris.
Oxford University professor John Ruskin was the first professional art historian whose writings promoted the values and benefits of handmade crafts. William Morris adopted Ruskin's philosophies and worked to incorporate classical arts and crafts techniques into commercial design. One individual who was particularly influenced by the works of Ruskin and Morris was the American furniture maker Gustav Strickley.
Gustav Strickley was born in 1858 in Wisconsin. His family was of German descent, and his father was a stonemason. He became involved in the furniture trade when he moved to Pennsylvania with his mother and began to work in his uncle's chair factory.
With his furniture and later his home designs, Strickley focused on creating a new American style. At the core of his philosophy was his sturdy approach to design and function. Using classical joinery in combination with traditional oak, Strickley created rigid structural furniture that he argued would last for generations. For years, the honesty of Strickley's craftsmanship has delighted novices and experts alike.
So what I want to talk about is how this chair expresses arts and crafts philosophy. A lot of people would see this chair and think it's maybe even a clumsy looking piece of furniture, but it's really quite elegant. I'll tell you why. The thing about arts and crafts is it defines a lifestyle. It's about integrity and honesty and being really upfront. And if you look at this chair, it reveals itself to you. I like to say that arts and crafts is a self-revelatory philosophy. For example, how does that translate to the design of this chair? This front leg joins this arm at this juncture. That's a real through tenon. That's a carved down piece of the front leg that pierces the arm, holds it in place, locks it in, very solid. But at the same time, you could look at this chair not knowing anything about arts and crafts furniture, say, oh, I see how that's joined. I see how that's made there. There's even a pin on the inside of the arm that locks it in place. This corbel underneath the arm, similarly, also locked in place with a pin. It adds support to the top of the arm. Over years of weight on the outside of the arm, it would drop. That corbel keeps it in place. It's one of the only curved elements on an otherwise rectilinear chair, so it also softens the straightforwardness of the piece. Beyond that, this front panel also pierces the leg, forming what's called a through tenon, yet again telling you how this thing is made. Finally, there's no carved ornamentation on this chair. For example, if you look at the grain on the sides of these panels, this is called quartered oak. It's an expensive way to make wood, but the tiger striping or flaking of the grain becomes decoration, so it's an integral element of the piece that becomes decoration of the chair, just as the joinery elements I showed you did.
In 1901, Strickley began publishing the Craftsman magazine as a vehicle to sell furniture and advertisements. But its editors had loftier ideals. In the pages of each issue, they encouraged readers to live healthy, uncluttered lives that were wholesome and pure. Almost every major artist, designer, and patron of the arts soon began reading the Craftsman magazine. Among them was Elbert Hubbard. A successful but unsatisfied soap salesman in Buffalo, New York, Hubbard opened his own print shop and soon became a prolific and popular writer. His success gave rise to the Roycrofters, a handicraft community in East Aurora, New York, that included metalsmiths, leathersmiths, bookbinders, and furniture makers. These artisans quickly became known for their simple, straight-line style of furniture. Hubbard's art community flourished, and by 1910 included more than 500 Roycroft craftspeople.